The rain hit the cobblestone street like tiny bullets, and Daniela Kinsley barely noticed as she ducked under the awning of a bakery that had long since closed for the night. She had been running for blocks, her heels clutched in one hand, her dress clinging to her skin, and she was laughing despite everything because what else could she do when the universe kept throwing curveballs? Her best friend's wedding had been beautiful, the reception even more so, but somewhere between the champagne toast and the bouquet toss, she had realized she was tired of being the woman everyone expected her to be. So she left early, slipped out the back, and now here she was at midnight in Manhattan, drenched and free. "You look like you could use this." A voice came from beside her, low and warm, and she turned to find a man holding out his suit jacket. He was tall, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to catch the streetlight in a way that made her breath hitch. His white shirt was getting soaked, rain plastering it to broad shoulders, but he didn't seem to care. "I'm already wet," she said, but she was smiling and he smiled back. "So am I. But at least you could be less wet." He draped the jacket over her shoulders anyway, and the warmth of it, the smell of expensive cologne mixed with rain, made her feel something she hadn't felt in months, maybe years, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "I'm Daniela." She stuck out her hand, formal despite the circumstances, and he took it. His grip was firm, confident. Felix Xander. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, and neither of them seemed to want to let go. "What are you running from? Who says I'm running?" But she laughed, and it gave her away. "The shoes in your hand. The fact that you're standing in the rain like it's the best place in the world. I know that look." His eyes were serious now, searching hers. "I've worn it myself." They talked for an hour under that awning, then two. The rain didn't stop, and neither did they. He told her about growing up with impossible expectations, about a father who built an empire and expected his son to maintain it without question. She told him about her job as a museum curator, about how she loved bringing art to life for people but felt like her own life was a painting she was viewing from behind velvet ropes. They talked about dreams and fears and all the small moments that make up a life, and somewhere in the middle of it, she realized she had never felt this connected to anyone. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here," Felix said finally. "Best coffee in the city, and they make a French toast that will change your life. Come with me." She should have said no. She should have called a car, gone home, returned to her sensible life with her sensible apartment and her sensible cat named Monet. But instead, she said yes. The diner was nearly empty. Just a couple of night shift workers and a waitress who looked like she had seen everything and was unimpressed by all of it. They slid into a booth in the back, and Felix ordered for both of them with an easy confidence that made her wonder what it would be like to move through the world so certain of your place in it. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," he said, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. That's a dangerous question for a first meeting. But she was already thinking, already sorting through all the secret corners of herself. "I hate my birthday. Everyone makes such a big deal out of it, but all I can think about is how another year has passed, and I still haven't done half the things I promised myself I would do." "Like what?" "Like travel to Japan and see the cherry blossoms. Like learn to paint instead of just studying paintings. Like fall in love with someone who sees me, really sees me, not just the version I present to the world." She felt her cheeks heat. That was more than one thing. Those are good things. His voice was soft. Important things. He reached across the table and took her hand, and the touch sent electricity up her arm. "My turn. I've never told anyone that sometimes I wake up in the morning and don't recognize my own life. I have everything anyone could want, but it feels like I'm living someone else's story." "What would your story look like?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I think it might start tonight." They stayed until the sun came up, until the city began to wake around them and the diner filled with the morning crowd. They walked through Central Park as joggers passed and dogs barked and the world turned ordinary again, but nothing felt ordinary between them. He told her about his mother, who had died when he was 12, and how he still missed her every day. She told him about her sister, who lived in California with 3 kids and a husband who adored her, and how sometimes Daniela felt like she was failing at being an adult because she didn't want that same life. "You're not failing," Felix said firmly. They had stopped by the lake and he turned to face her fully. "You're just finding your own path. That takes more courage than following someone else's map." "You don't even know me," she whispered, but her heart was pounding. "I feel like I do. Like I've been waiting to know you." He cupped her face in his hands, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home and setting sail at the same time. Like every romantic notion she had ever dismissed as fiction was suddenly, impossibly real. They spent the entire day together. He took her to his favorite bookstore, a cramped space in the village where the owner knew him by name and recommended novels like he was sharing state secrets. She took him to the museum where she worked, using her key to let them in through the staff entrance, even though it was Sunday, and they shouldn't have been there. They stood in front of a Monet, and she told him about how the artist had painted the same scene over and over, capturing different moments of light, different truths. "That's what this feels like," Felix said, his arm around her waist. "Like every moment with you is the same but completely different. Like I keep discovering new things." They had dinner at a tiny Italian place where the pasta was handmade, and the owner sang opera between courses. They talked and laughed and touched constantly, unable to keep their hands off each other. Every brush of fingers felt significant. Every shared glance held weight. As night fell again, they walked back to her apartment building in Brooklyn, taking the long way, neither wanting the day to end. On her stoop, he kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt herself falling into something she couldn't name. "Come upstairs," she said against his mouth, and he did. They made love slowly, learning each other in the darkness of her bedroom while the city hummed outside her window. It was tender and passionate and perfect, and when they finally lay tangled together in her sheets, Daniela felt a fear so sharp it stole her breath. Because this meant something. This mattered. And she had spent so long protecting herself from mattering too much to anyone. Felix fell asleep with his arm around her, his breathing deep and even, but Daniela lay awake. She thought about her parents' bitter divorce, about her father's string of failed relationships, about her own history of choosing men who were safe precisely because she could never really love them. She thought about the look in Felix's eyes when he talked about his father's expectations, about the weight he carried that she could see even when he smiled. They were from different worlds. She could feel it in the expensive watch he had left on her nightstand, in the way the waitress at the diner had practically bowed when he left a tip. He had said his last name was Xander, and now, in the quiet of 3 in the morning, she realized where she had heard it before. Xander Industries. Real estate, construction, development. Billions of dollars and influence that shaped skylines. She slipped out of bed carefully, pulling on jeans and a sweater. In her living room, she grabbed her phone and searched his name. The articles confirmed everything. Felix Xander, 32, heir to the Xander fortune, recently named CEO after his father's retirement. There were photos of him at galas, at business conferences, always in a perfect suit with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes, not like the smile he had given her. Daniela sat on her couch and let herself cry quietly, because she knew what would happen. They would try to make this work, and it would be beautiful for a while. But eventually, his world would swallow them both. She would meet his friends, his colleagues, his father who expected perfection. She would be measured and found wanting. Or worse, she would change herself to fit, and 5 years from now she would wake up and not recognize her own life, just like he had described. She couldn't do that, and she couldn't do that to him either. He deserved someone who could walk into his world without fear, who could stand beside him without feeling like she was drowning. So she did the only thing that made sense in that moment. She packed a small bag, wrote a note that said simply, "I'm sorry." This was perfect. Let it stay that way, and she left. She went to her sister's apartment in Queens, climbed the stairs quietly so as not to wake anyone, and used the spare key hidden under the mat. In the guest room that still smelled like her childhood, she finally let herself sob. Felix woke to sunlight and an empty bed. He reached for Daniela before his eyes were fully open, already addicted to the feel of her, but his hand found only cool sheets. He sat up, calling her name, but the apartment was silent in a way that felt wrong. He found the note on the kitchen counter. Read it 3 times, then crumpled it in his fist and had to brace himself against the counter because his chest felt like someone had reached in and torn something vital out. He searched the apartment desperately, looking for something, anything that would tell him more, but there was nothing. No photos, no mail with her full name visible, nothing but the memory of her and the lingering scent of her perfume. He tried calling the museum, but it was Sunday and no one answered. He went there himself, but the building was locked, and when he finally found a security guard, the man wouldn't give him any information about employees. Privacy policies, he said, not unkindly. Felix went home to his penthouse apartment that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. He sat in his living room surrounded by expensive furniture and art that meant nothing, and he understood for the first time what true loss felt like. He had lost his mother, yes, but he had been young enough that the pain had been cushioned by incomprehension. This was different. This was knowing exactly what he had lost and being powerless to get it back. He tried to convince himself it was crazy. One night, one day together, and he was acting like he had lost his soulmate. But it didn't feel crazy. It felt like the only real thing that had ever happened to him. On Monday, he went to the museum the moment it opened. He walked through every gallery until he found a curator, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who looked concerned when he approached. "I'm looking for someone who works here." "Her name is Daniela," he said, trying not to sound as desperate as he felt. "I'm sorry, but we have privacy policies regarding our staff," she said gently. "I can't give out personal information. Please, I just need to talk to her, just once." He was begging now, and he didn't care. The woman studied him for a long moment. "What does she look like?" He described her, every detail he had memorized. The light brown hair that caught gold in the sun. The green eyes that seemed to change shade depending on her mood. The small scar on her left hand that she had gotten from a childhood accident involving a bicycle and a rose bush. The curator's expression softened with recognition, but then she shook her head. "I'm sorry. I really can't help you. If she wanted you to find her, she would have given you away." Felix left feeling hollowed out, but he didn't give up. Over the next week, he returned to every place they had been together. The diner, the bookstore, the restaurant. He left his number with every hostess, every waiter, every cashier, asking them to call if they saw a woman matching her description. Most of them looked at him like he was insane, but a few seemed to understand. The owner of the bookstore, a man named Morris who wore thick glasses and perpetually ink-stained fingers, actually patted his shoulder. "Love makes fools of us all," he said, "but the good kind of fool, the kind worth being." Felix hired a private investigator, a woman named Susan who came highly recommended and charged appropriately. He gave her every scrap of information he had. First name Daniela, works as a curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, lives in Brooklyn, has a sister in California with 3 kids. It wasn't much. A week later, Susan came back with her findings. There were 4 Danielas who worked at the Met in curatorial positions. She had photos of all of them, but one made Felix's heart stop. That was her. Daniela Kinsley, 29 years old, specialist in Impressionist art, had worked at the museum for 5 years. She took a leave of absence 3 days after the date you specified, Susan said, consulting her notes. Her apartment in Brooklyn is empty. Neighbors say they haven't seen her. Her sister lives in Los Angeles, not California broadly, but I haven't been able to confirm if she's there. She's not using her credit cards, at least not the ones I could find. It's like she doesn't want to be found. Keep looking, Felix said. Please. But weeks became months, and there was nothing. Daniela had effectively disappeared. Felix threw himself into work because it was the only thing that kept him from going mad. He restructured divisions, launched new projects, and worked 18-hour days that left him too exhausted to dream. His assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia who had worked for his father before him, started leaving coffee on his desk with concerned looks. "You need to take care of yourself," she said one morning in March, 4 months after that perfect night. "Whatever you're running from, it will still be there when you collapse from exhaustion." "I'm not running from anything," Felix said. "I'm looking for something, someone." Patricia sat down across from him, uninvited, which meant she was serious. "Then let me help you look." He told her everything. About meeting Daniela in the rain, about the connection that had felt like magic, about waking up to find her gone. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "She's scared," Patricia finally said. "Anyone can see that. The question is whether you respect her fear enough to let her go, or whether you love her enough to show her there's nothing to be afraid of." "How do I show her if I can't find her?" The frustration in his voice was sharp enough to cut. "You keep looking, but you also keep living. Because if you do find her, you need to be the man she fell for, not the shell he became." Felix took her advice. He kept looking, kept the investigator on retainer, but he also started living again. He went back to the bookstore and bought novels Morris recommended. He visited the museum, standing in front of that same Monet painting and trying to see what Daniela had seen. He started running in Central Park in the mornings, the same path they had walked together. He was looking for her, yes, but he was also trying to hold onto the version of himself that had existed that night. The one who had believed in possibility. Summer came, hot and sticky, and Felix attended a charity gala for a children's hospital. He hated these events, the forced socializing and the people who only saw his bank account, but his father had founded the hospital wing and it mattered to him. He was making small talk with a donor when he saw a flash of light brown hair across the room. His heart stopped. He excused himself rudely and pushed through the crowd, but when he reached the spot, the woman turned and it wasn't her, just someone with similar hair. He left early and walked home, all 40 blocks to his building, trying to clear his head. Autumn arrived, and with it came a new lead. Susan called him on a Tuesday in October, nearly a year after he had met Daniela. "I found something," she said. Her sister posted on social media. "Just family photos, but there's a woman in the background of one who matches the description. It's grainy, but I think it's her. Send it to me." Felix pulled up the photo on his computer minutes later. It was a birthday party for one of the kids, balloons and cake and smiling faces. And there, slightly out of focus in the background, was Daniela. She looked thinner, sadder, but it was definitely her. "The location is tagged," Susan continued. A park in Los Angeles. I can have someone check area residential buildings, see if we can narrow down where she's staying. No. Felix surprised himself with the firmness of his response. I'll go myself. Just find me an address. It took another 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Susan working her contacts and Felix trying not to hope too hard. Finally, she called with an address. A modest apartment building in Silver Lake, registered to Daniela's sister, but with utility bills that suggested 2 adults living there. Felix was on a plane the next day. He didn't plan what he would say. He just knew he needed to see her, needed to understand why she had run, needed to tell her that whatever she was afraid of, they could face it together. The building was pale yellow stucco with bougainvillea climbing one wall. Felix stood outside for 5 minutes, gathering courage before he finally buzzed the apartment number Susan had given him. Yes. A woman's voice, not Daniela's, came through the intercom. I'm looking for Daniela Kinsley. My name is Felix Zander. Please, I just need to talk to her. There was a long silence. Then, come up. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. The woman who answered the door looked like an older version of Daniela, same eyes but with laugh lines and a wariness that made Felix's chest hurt. You must be her sister, he said, Deanna. And you must be the man who broke my sister's heart. Her tone wasn't hostile, just matter of fact. She broke mine first, Felix said quietly. Is she here? Deanna studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. She's at work, but you should wait, we need to talk. The apartment was small but homey, filled with kids' artwork and family photos. Deanna made coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table while Felix tried not to fidget with impatience. She told me about you, Deanna said. Not at first. She showed up here last November saying she needed a break from New York, from her job, from everything. She was a mess. I've never seen my sister cry like that. It took me 2 weeks to get the story out of her. What did she say? Felix needed to know, needed to understand. That she met someone perfect, and that's why she had to leave. That you lived in a world she could never be part of. That she would rather have one perfect night than a lifetime of trying to be something she's not. Deanna wrapped her hands around her mug. My sister has spent her whole life trying to be smaller than she is. Our parents' divorce was ugly, and she convinced herself that love was something that destroyed people. She's been playing it safe ever since, never letting anyone get too close. I wouldn't have destroyed her, Felix said, hearing the roughness in his own voice. I wanted to love her, I still do. I know. I've seen her this past year, seen her try to move on, and she can't. She got a job at the Getty doing work she loves, but she's still miserable. She thinks she made the right choice, but she's not living, she's just existing. Deanna leaned forward. So here's my question, Felix Zander. Are you here because you've spent a year obsessing over the one that got away? Or are you here because you genuinely believe she's the person you want to spend your life with? Both, Felix said honestly. I won't pretend the search hasn't become an obsession. But it's not about winning or about pride. It's because that night, that day with her, I was more myself than I've ever been. She saw me, not the company or the money or the expectations. Just me. And I saw her. The real her, not the careful curator who keeps everyone at a distance. We fit. And I think she knows that, which is exactly why she ran. Deanna smiled, small but genuine. Good answer. She gets off work at 5. The Getty Center, you can't miss it. But Felix, don't let her run again. My sister is stubborn, but she's also scared. Show her there's nothing to be scared of. Felix waited in the parking structure of the Getty Center, leaning against his rental car and trying to steady his breathing. It was 4:55. The sun was starting its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. People were leaving the museum, tourists and staff filtering out in clusters. He watched every face, his heart jumping at every woman with light brown hair. And then he saw her. She was walking with a colleague, laughing at something the other woman said, and the sound of her laughter hit him like a physical blow. She looked good, healthy, her hair longer than he remembered and pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing a blue dress and a cardigan, professional but still her. And for a moment he couldn't breathe because she was really here, really real, after a year of searching and hoping and remembering. She must have felt his stare because she looked up, looked right at him, and her face went through a dozen expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, fear, and something else he couldn't quite name, but that gave him hope. She said something to her colleague and walked toward him slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal. When she was close enough to touch, she stopped. Felix. His name on her lips after so long made his eyes sting. "How did you find me?" "I've been looking for a year," he said simply. "Every day, every city, every lead. I wasn't going to stop until I found you. You should have stopped." But her voice broke on the words. "You should have moved on, found someone else, someone who fits your life." "I don't want someone who fits my life. I want you. I want the woman who talked to me about art and dreams and fear under a bakery awning. I want the woman who took me into a closed museum and showed me beauty. I want Daniela, just as you are, no fitting required." He took a step closer, and she didn't back away. "Why did you leave?" "Because I was terrified." The words came out in a rush, like she had been holding them back for months. "Because that night meant everything to me, and I knew if I stayed, I would fall completely in love with you. And then what? I move into your world. Become the curator girlfriend who never quite measures up at business dinners. Watch you realize over time that I'm not enough. Or worse, watch myself change into someone I don't recognize just to keep you." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch us destroy something perfect. So you destroyed it yourself instead." He said it gently, without accusation. "Daniela, that night was perfect, you're right, but it doesn't have to be the only perfect night. It can be the first of thousands. You don't understand." She wiped at her tears angrily. "I Googled you after you fell asleep. I saw who you are, what your life is like. Billionaire CEO Felix Zander, heir to an empire. That's not me. I'm a curator who lives in a Brooklyn walk-up and shops at thrift stores and thinks a fancy night out is trying the new ramen place. We're from different worlds." "No." Felix caught her hand, held it between both of his. "We're from the same world. The one where people are lonely and scared and desperately hoping to find someone who understands them. The money doesn't matter. The title doesn't matter. What matters is that I have spent the last year trying to find even a fraction of what I felt with you, and I can't. Because it doesn't exist with anyone else." "What if you're wrong?" she whispered. "What if we try and it doesn't work?" "Then at least we tried. At least we didn't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if." He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "I love you, Daniela Kinsley. I fell in love with you that night in the rain, and every day since has only proven I was right to. I love your passion for art and the way you see beauty everywhere. I love that you left a wedding early to run through the rain. I love your fear because it means you're brave enough to feel things deeply. And I promise you, I will spend every day showing you that there's nothing to be afraid of. I love you too," she sobbed. "I've loved you this whole year, even though I tried not to. Even though I told myself I did the right thing. I've been miserable without you. Then stop being miserable." He kissed her, and it was like that first kiss in Central Park but better, because now they knew what they had almost lost. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, and he could feel her trembling against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come back to New York with me, or I'll move here, or we'll find somewhere new together." I don't care where we are as long as we're together. I want to come home, she said. I want to go back to New York, back to my job if they'll have me, back to the life I ran away from, but this time with you in it, really in it. They'll have you back, Felix said with certainty. I may have made some very generous donations to the museum over the past year, anonymously, of course, but I'm sure they remember your name fondly. She laughed through her tears. You did not. I did. I wanted to support the place that gave you joy, even if I couldn't find you. He kissed her again, softer this time. I want to do this right, Daniela. I want to take you on dates and meet your friends and have you meet mine. I want to integrate our lives slowly, carefully, so you never feel like you're losing yourself. I want you to keep being exactly who you are because that's who I fell in love with. Okay. She was smiling now, really smiling. Okay, but I need to tell my sister in person, and I need to give notice at the Getty, do this properly. We have time now. Felix pulled her close again, just wanting to hold her. We have all the time in the world. They went to Diana's apartment together, hand in hand. Diana took one look at them and grinned. About time, she said, pulling her sister into a hug. I've been waiting for you to stop being an idiot. Thanks for the support, Daniela said dryly, but she was laughing. They stayed for dinner, Felix sitting on the floor playing blocks with Diana's kids while the sisters cooked. It was chaotic and loud and perfect, and he could see Daniela watching him, something soft in her expression. You're good with them, she said later, when the kids were in bed and the adults were having wine on the small balcony. I want kids someday, Felix said. A whole house full of them, running around and making noise and driving us crazy in the best way. Is that something you want? Yes. She leaned against him. I want that. With you. They flew back to New York a week later, after Daniela had properly resigned from the Getty and said her goodbyes. Felix held her hand the entire flight, still half afraid she would disappear if he let go. Her apartment in Brooklyn was exactly as she had left it, dusty but intact. Felix helped her clean while she called the Met, and they were thrilled to have her back. Her leave of absence had been approved for mental health reasons, and they had kept her position open hoping she would return. They really want me back, she said, hanging up the phone with wonder in her voice. They said I was too valuable to lose. Of course you are. Felix kissed the top of her head. You're brilliant at what you do. They took it slow, just like he had promised. He took her to dinner at small restaurants in Brooklyn and the Village, places where they could talk without being interrupted. She took him to art galleries in Queens, to poetry readings in the Lower East Side, showing him her New York. They went to the bookstore where Morris greeted Daniela like an old friend and gave Felix a knowing look. You found her, he said simply. I did. Good man. Felix met Daniela's friends from the museum, a group of curators and archivists who were protective of her but warmed up when they saw how he looked at her. Daniela met his small circle of actual friends, not business associates but the college roommate who now taught history and the cousin who ran a non-profit. She was nervous, but she charmed them all without trying. She's real, his cousin Martin said later. Not like those social climbers you usually get set up with. She actually likes you. I know, Felix said, and he couldn't stop smiling. The hard part came when it was time to meet his father. Robert Zander was 72, retired but still formidable, a man who had built his empire through ruthless business sense and impossibly high standards. Felix had been dreading it, but Daniela insisted. I need to do this, she said. I need to face the part that scared me most. They had dinner at his father's estate in Connecticut, a sprawling property that Daniela stared at with wide eyes. You grew up here, she asked, unfortunately. Felix squeezed her hand. Just remember, his approval doesn't matter. You're with me, not him. But Robert surprised them both. He asked Daniela about her work, actually listened to her answers, and by the end of the evening he was smiling. "You're good for him," he told Daniela as they were leaving. "He's been different this past year, more focused but also more human. I suspect that's your influence." "Sir, I actually ran away from him for a year," Daniela said honestly. "I'm not sure I can take credit for any positive changes." Robert laughed, a genuine sound that made Felix's eyebrows rise. "You challenged him, made him work for something instead of having it handed to him." "That's exactly what he needed. Welcome to the family, Daniela." In the car on the way back to the city, Daniela was quiet. "You okay?" Felix asked. "Your father is terrifying," she said, "but also kind of wonderful. He told me about your mother, how much she loved Impressionist art. How she would have loved to meet me." "She would have." Felix had to swallow hard. "She would have adored you." 6 months passed in a blur of happiness. Daniela moved into Felix's penthouse, initially nervous about the space but slowly making it theirs. She hung art on the walls, filled the shelves with books, brought in plants that made the place feel alive. Felix loved coming home to her, to the sound of her singing off-key in the kitchen or finding her curled up reading on the couch. They traveled to Japan in the spring, timed perfectly for the cherry blossoms. Daniela cried when she saw them, standing under a tree in full bloom while petals drifted down like snow. "Thank you," she whispered, and Felix kissed her there under the sakura trees, knowing this was just one of many dreams he wanted to help her achieve. He proposed on the anniversary of the night they met. He took her back to that same bakery awning, which required some serious planning and a generous payment to the owner to let them have the spot at midnight. It was raining again, perfectly, and when she arrived thinking they were just going for a nostalgic walk, she found him standing there with a ring. "1 year ago, I met the love of my life right here," he said. "And I lost her before I even realized how much she meant to me. I spent a year finding you again, and now I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never want to run. Daniela Kinsley, will you marry me?" "Yes." She was crying and laughing and nodding all at once. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring was perfect, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, and when he slipped it on her finger, she tackled him in a hug so fierce they nearly fell over. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the museum, right in front of the Monet they both loved. Daniela wore a simple ivory dress that made her look ethereal, and Felix couldn't stop staring at her. Diana was maid of honor, Martin was best man, and Robert walked Daniela down the aisle since her own father had passed years before. "Take care of her," Robert whispered to Felix before the ceremony. "She's special." "I know," Felix said. "I will." Their vows were personal, written by themselves. Daniela promised to stop running, to trust in their love even when she was scared. Felix promised to always see her, to support her dreams no matter how big or small, to build a life where she never felt like she had to be anyone but herself. When the officiant pronounced them married, the small crowd of friends and family cheered, and Felix kissed his wife like she was oxygen and he had been drowning. The reception was at a restaurant they both loved, casual and warm, full of laughter and joy. They danced to a jazz band, and Daniela rested her head on his chest. "I can't believe I almost missed this," she said. "I almost threw all of this away because I was scared. But you didn't." Felix kissed her hair. "You were brave enough to let me find you, to give us a chance. That's what matters. I love you, Felix Zander. I love you, Daniela Zander." He spun her out and back in, making her laugh. Always. They honeymooned in France, visiting the places where Monet had painted, where the Impressionists had revolutionized art. Daniela stood in Giverny, looking at the gardens that had inspired so many paintings, and Felix watched her face light up with pure joy. "I want to paint," she said suddenly. "I know I said I'm not good at it, but I want to try. I want to create something, not just study what others created." "Then we'll set up a studio," Felix said immediately. "The penthouse has that extra room with the good light. We'll make it yours." And they did. When they returned to New York, they converted the room, filling it with canvases and paints and an easel by the window. Daniela painted in her free time, and she was right that she wasn't technically skilled yet, but her work had emotion and life. Felix hung her first finished piece in his office at Zander Industries, and when people asked about it, he told them proudly that his wife had painted it. A year into their marriage, Daniela came home from the doctor with news that made her nervous and excited in equal measure. "I'm pregnant," she said, showing Felix the test. "We're going to have a baby." Felix lifted her off her feet, spinning her around and kissing her breathless. "We're having a baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "We're going to be parents. Are you ready for this?" Daniela asked, holding his face between her hands. "Because I'm terrified and thrilled, and I need you to tell me we can do this. We can do this." He set her down gently, his hand going to her still flat stomach. "We can do anything together. Haven't we proven that already?" Pregnancy was hard. Daniela was sick for the first 3 months, exhausted for the next 3, and uncomfortable for the final 3. But Felix was there for all of it, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her feet when they swelled, talking to her belly about all the things he wanted to show their child. "I want to take you to the Met," he told her stomach one night while Daniela laughed at him. "Your mother will show you the most beautiful paintings, and we'll tell you about the night we met in the rain. We'll take you to that diner for French toast and to the bookstore where Morris will already have books picked out for you. You're going to have the best life, little one. So loved." Their daughter was born on a snowy day in January, tiny and perfect with Daniela's eyes and Felix's dark hair. They named her Evelyn Rose after Felix's mother, and because Daniela had always loved the name. Holding his daughter for the first time, Felix felt a completeness he had never known existed. Daniela lay exhausted in the hospital bed, watching him with tears in her eyes, and he knew she felt it too. "We made this," he said softly, looking at the tiny face. "We made this perfect little person." "She's so beautiful," Daniela whispered. "I didn't know I could love someone this much." "Now you know how I feel about you," Felix said, and Daniela smiled through her tears. They brought Evelyn home to a penthouse full of flowers and congratulations, and life shifted into the beautiful chaos of new parenthood. Felix took paternity leave, the first time he had taken more than a few days off in his life, and threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything. He changed diapers and walked the floors at night when Evelyn wouldn't sleep and stared at his daughter like she was the greatest wonder in the world. Daniela went back to work part-time after 3 months, and they hired a nanny they both trusted, but she missed Evelyn desperately on the days she was at the museum. Felix started working from home more, conducting meetings by video call so he could be near his family. "Your employees must think you've lost your mind," Daniela said one afternoon, finding him in his home office with Evelyn asleep in a carrier on his chest. "I don't care what they think," Felix said, looking down at his daughter with such tenderness it made Daniela's heart squeeze. "This is more important than any deal or project. Being here with you with her, that's what matters." As Evelyn grew, she became more of a person every day. Her first smile was for Daniela, her first laugh for Felix. She loved music and art, would stare at paintings with serious concentration even as a baby. They took her everywhere, wanting her to experience the world. On a spring afternoon, when Evelyn was 18 months old, the 3 of them sat in Central Park near the lake. Evelyn toddled around chasing pigeons while Daniela and Felix watched, holding hands. "Remember when we walked here after we met?" Daniela said. "When you kissed me right over there by that tree." "I remember everything about that day," Felix said. "Best day of my life until today." "Until today." Daniela raised an eyebrow. "Every day with you is the best day of my life. Each one better than the last." He pulled her closer. "I know you were scared that we came from different worlds, that we wouldn't fit, but look at what we built. Look at our daughter, our life, us. We didn't fit into each other's worlds. We created a new one together." Evelyn ran back to them then, grass-stained and happy, and climbed into Daniela's lap. "Mama, ducks." "Yes, baby, ducks." Daniela kissed her head, breathing in the sweet smell of her. "Do you want to go see them?" They walked to the lake together, Felix carrying Evelyn on his shoulders while she shrieked with delight. Daniela watched her husband and daughter and felt gratitude so profound it was almost painful. She had almost missed this. She had almost let her fear steal this life from her. 2 years later, they had a son. Lucas James came into the world howling and continued to be loud about everything he wanted. He was Felix in miniature, determined and charming and absolutely certain of his place in the world. Evelyn adored him, would bring him toys when he cried and sing to him in her tiny off-key voice that reminded Felix of Daniela. The penthouse that had once felt cold and empty now rang with children's laughter. There were toys in every room, art projects on the fridge, and a chaos that Felix loved more than order. Daniela had cut back to part-time at the museum, and Felix had restructured his role at Xander Industries to focus on projects he was passionate about, delegating the rest. They had found a balance that worked for their family. When Evelyn started kindergarten, Daniela cried. "They grow up too fast," she said, watching their daughter walk into school with her backpack nearly as big as she was. "We have time," Felix said, pulling her close. "So much time. And every phase is going to be amazing because we're doing it together." On their 5th wedding anniversary, they went back to that awning where they had met. It had become a tradition, standing there every year and remembering. The bakery owner had died and the space was now a coffee shop, but the awning was the same. 5 years married, 6 years since we met," Daniela said, leaning into Felix's warmth. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime and sometimes it feels like yesterday." "Do you ever regret it?" Felix asked. "Not staying that morning. The year apart," Daniela thought about it seriously. "I regret the pain I caused both of us, but I don't regret being scared because overcoming that fear made me braver. And watching you search for me, knowing you loved me enough not to give up, that showed me this was real, this was worth fighting for." "I would have searched forever," Felix said. "I want you to know that. If it had taken 10 years or 20, I wouldn't have stopped." "I know." She kissed him softly. "That's why I'm not running anymore. That's why I never will again." They stood there in the rain, older now but still them, still the two people who had found each other on an impossible night and built an impossible love. Above them, the awning kept them dry, and around them the city moved on, full of other stories, other chances, other perfect nights. But this was theirs. This love, this life, this beautiful chaos they had created together. And standing there in the rain, holding hands and holding on to each other, Felix and Daniela knew without a doubt that they had found what everyone searches for. They had found home in each other, and that was worth everything. Years continued to pass, each one adding to the story they were writing together. Evelyn grew into a thoughtful girl who loved reading and art just like her mother. She would spend hours in Daniela's studio, painting beside her, and their conversations about color and light reminded Felix of that first night when Daniela had explained Monet to him. Lucas was all energy and mischief. constantly testing boundaries and charming his way out of trouble. He idolized his father, would follow him around the penthouse in a tiny suit jacket Felix had gotten him as a joke, carrying a toy briefcase and declaring he was going to work. "Heaven help us when he's actually old enough to work," Daniela said, watching him. "He's going to rule the world." "Or drive us crazy trying," Felix agreed, "but he'll do it with style." When Daniela's sister Diana got divorced, they supported her through it. She moved back to New York with her kids, and suddenly their family was even bigger. The cousins grew up together, thick as thieves, and Diana rebuilt her life with the help of her sister. "Thank you," Diana said one night after a particularly chaotic family dinner, "for taking us in, for being here. I don't know what I would have done without you two." "Your family," Daniela said simply. "That's what family does." Felix's father grew older, frailer, but he remained involved in their lives. He doted on Evelyn and Lucas in a way that shocked everyone who knew him. The ruthless businessman became a gentle grandfather, teaching Evelyn chess and taking Lucas to construction sites to see how buildings were made. "You changed him too," Felix told Daniela one evening after Robert had left from dinner. "He's softer now, happier. I think he sees in our family what he wishes he had given me." "He gave you strength and determination," Daniela said. "That's not nothing. You just added heart to it." Robert passed away when Evelyn was 10 and Lucas was 8, peacefully in his sleep at 78. At the funeral, Felix gave the eulogy, talking about his father's legacy not just in business but in family. About how in his final years he had found joy in simple moments with grandchildren. About how he had welcomed Daniela with open arms and told Felix privately that marrying her was the smartest business decision he had ever made. "He was hard," Felix said, his voice breaking slightly. "But he was also good, and he taught me that strength and love aren't opposites. You can be both." Daniela held his hand through the entire service, and afterward, she held him while he cried for the complicated, difficult, loving man his father had been. The years brought challenges. Daniela's job became more demanding as she was promoted to senior curator, and there were times when balancing career and family felt impossible. Felix struggled with the weight of running Xander Industries, alone now, without his father's counsel. They had fights, normal couple arguments about whose turn it was to handle school pickup or why the dishwasher was loaded wrong. But they always came back to each other, always talked through it, always remembered what they had almost lost. On their 10th anniversary, Felix planned a surprise. He took Daniela back to that diner where they had eaten French toast as the sun came up. It was the same waitress, incredibly older but still with that seen everything expression. "You too," she said, recognizing them immediately. "You came back." "We did," Felix said. 10 years married, 11 years since we sat in that booth and talked all night. I remember. You looked at her like she hung the moon." The waitress smiled. "Still do, from what I can see." They ordered French toast again, sat in the same booth and talked like they had that first night. But now the conversation included stories about their kids, about work challenges and family dynamics, about the life they had built. "I have something for you," Felix said, pulling out a box. Inside was a painting, small but exquisitely done. It was the bakery awning in the rain, 2 figures standing beneath it, clearly recognizable as the two of them. "You painted this," Daniela said, wonder in her voice. "When did you learn to paint? You inspired me. I've been taking lessons for the past year, wanting to surprise you." "It's not as good as your work, but it's perfect." Daniela was crying, holding the painting like it was the most precious thing in the world. "It's absolutely perfect. Thank you." "Thank you for not giving up on us," Felix said. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me love you." They kissed across the table, and the waitress smiled and left them alone. Evelyn went to college when she was 18, choosing to study art history like her mother. Daniela cried the entire drive home from dropping her off, and Felix held her hand and let her. "She's going to be amazing," he said. "Just like her mother, I know. That's not why I'm crying." Daniela wiped at her eyes. "I'm crying because time moved so fast. Wasn't she just learning to walk? Wasn't she just bringing me dandelions from the park?" "She still is that little girl," Felix said. "She's just more now too, bigger, but still ours." Lucas followed 3 years later, choosing business school because he wanted to join Xander Industries. Felix had never pushed him toward it, had made it clear his son could choose any path, but Lucas was adamant. "I want to build things like you did," he said. "I want to make a difference. Plus, someone has to carry on the family business with actual Xander blood." So Felix began grooming his son to eventually take over, teaching him everything his father had taught him, but with more patience, more kindness. Watching Lucas grow into a man, seeing echoes of himself, but also of Daniela's compassion and creativity, filled Felix with pride he couldn't quite express. On a crisp October day, nearly 20 years after that first night in the rain, Felix and Daniela walked through Central Park. Their kids were grown, building their own lives. The museum had just opened a new wing that Daniela had curated, and the reception had been a massive success. Felix had finally stepped down as CEO, handing control to Lucas and a team he trusted, ready to focus on philanthropy and spending time with his wife. They stopped by the lake, the same spot where they had stood so many times before. 20 years, Daniela said softly. "Sometimes I still can't believe we made it here." "Did you ever doubt we would?" Felix asked. "At the beginning, constantly. Even after we got married, sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night convinced it was all a dream. That I would wake up alone in that Brooklyn apartment and realize none of it was real." She smiled at him. "But you were always there, always solid, always sure. You made me believe. You made me whole," Felix said. "Before you, I was just going through motions, playing a part. You showed me what it meant to actually live. We showed each other." Daniela turned to face him fully. "That's what I figured out over the years. This wasn't you saving me or me completing you. This was two people choosing each other every single day, building something together." A young couple walked past them, clearly on a first date, nervous and excited. They reminded Felix of himself and Daniela, and he felt a wash of tenderness for who they had been. "You think they'll make it?" Daniela asked, watching them too. "I hope so. But even if they don't, I hope they're brave enough to try, to take the risk." "Like I almost didn't," Daniela said quietly. "But you did." Felix pulled her close. "In the end, you did. That's what matters." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in impressionist colors that Monet himself would have loved. Around them, the park filled with joggers and families and other couples in love. The city hummed with life and possibility. Felix thought about that night 20 years ago, about standing under an awning with a woman he had just met and feeling his entire world shift. He thought about the year of searching, the desperate hope that he would find her again. He thought about every moment since, every triumph and challenge and ordinary day that had brought them here, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would do it all again. Every moment of pain, every obstacle, every fear, because they had led him to this. To Daniela warm in his arms, to a life so full of love it sometimes overwhelmed him, to a happiness he had never imagined possible. "I love you," he said into her hair. 20 years later, and I love you more than I did that first night." "I love you too," Daniela whispered back. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for searching. Thank you for showing me that perfect doesn't have to be fleeting, that it can be a lifetime. They walked home hand in hand as the stars began to appear overhead. Just two people in a city of millions, living out a love story that had started with rain and fear, and one perfect night that had turned into thousands more. And somewhere in the universe, Monet's water lilies continued to bloom in shifting light, proving over and over that beauty and love, when captured at just the right moment, could last forever.